So I'm not saying that there was no Tiananmen Square incident. I'm saying that there was no Tiananmen Square massacre. And also that Tank Man was not run over by a tank. See, I'm 40. When I was younger, we were told that it was the Tiananmen Square massacre and that hundreds of students were mowed down by the Chinese military. And now journalists and historians are having to be a lot more academically honest, and they're having to call it the Tiananmen Square incident, not the Tiananmen Square massacre. And this is because over time, the evidence has come out that there was no massacre and that what they initially told us happened, that the soldiers opened fired on the students, did not happen. And that journalists that were there and initially reported that it did happen have now come out and said, actually, I wasn't there. I was down the road and, just reported what I was hearing. And those students have said things, the leadership of that student movement, that protest movement, have said things like, and I'm paraphrasing here, this isn't an exact quote, and I'll link a article about this down below that will give you a more exact quote, but the students said things like, to be wealthy is the same as democracy, and that they did not want the working class of China there at the square, which they have been occupying, sort of like how we occupied public squares during the Occupy Wall Street time. They were essentially doing the same thing for weeks, right? And they did not want the working class there because they basically said that the workers weren't to the intellectual level of these students. So you can see kind of the elitist and privileged class of students that were involved in this movement. And they were supported by American NGOs. I think it was like Voice of Freedom or something like that. They always have those cheesy names, right? And this is reminiscent of what we've seen more recently with the Hong Kong protests. And notice how anarchists and ultra leftists jumped all over that and supported them, and come to find out, they weren't exactly liberation, revolutionary fighters like the anarchists thought, right? And this should also give us pause right now when we're looking at and analyzing and reacting to Sri Lanka. We better be very careful before supporting this, that we really take a deep dive and look into what's happening there. But anyways, there was no Tiananmen Square massacre. We were lied to. It's sort of like the communism killed a bajillion people argument. They came out and said, some people said hundreds, some people said thousands. I mean, it's essentially the same kind of made up fairy tale, Red Scare propaganda BS that we're so accustomed to refuting. But that's all I was saying, comrade.